We want to get started with the town hall, and tonight we're just here to talk with you and to have you ask us questions. There's really no other presentation involved. I was going to ask, if you ask your question, it would be great if you just identified yourself, maybe with your feeder school if you want to or not. And then just take about a minute or so to try to get your question out so we can get around to as many people as possible, and then we'll try to get through as many folks who want to ask a question before we start with round two. But with that, I'd love to open up. Any questions?
What's round two?
Round two is just if everybody asks their first question, then round two would be if you want to go around and ask a second question. We just want to try to get as many people involved and engaged as possible. So there's no round two. Just the second round of questions. So anybody have any questions that you'd like to ask of us? You have 3 board members here and our student rep. So, yes.
I'm Leslie Ariel. I have a senior here at Lincoln High School. I had actually written a speech to deliver to a budget cut that was proposed for Lincoln last year, and I can leave that with you guys, but I want to know what is going on in terms of trying to get a consistent form of funding for the schools, adequate and consistent. And this is the biggest problem we have. It can't be that at the whim of the economic situation or whatever, that we don't have enough funds. We need to know, be secure in the funding for the students. It is the top priority. I am so tired of hearing all the candidates talk about, oh, funding for schools, we're really big into schools. It's baloney, because in the end, there is no funding for schools. Lincoln is in dire straits in terms of its funding, and it's basically parent funded. Right? Almost all the programs are parent funded, and normal things like books that should be supplied by public education are not being supplied. There should be equality amongst all the schools. The funding should not be dependent on your district. Should be statewide funding and equal wherever you grow up. So if you're in a poor district, you should be able to get just as much in terms of resources as anybody in an urban situation. This school is threatening to collapse in an earthquake. I have been thinking for years, I've got to get my kid out of here before something terrible happens. We're going to get a huge earthquake. The building cannot support it. The water delivery system is terrible. It's ancient. The building completely either needs to be revamped or scrapped, frankly. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not seeing, and my kid is not seeing, the proper funding level that says we care about our kids.
Good.
Right?
I agree with you.
All right, so what is being done in terms of that? And my adjunct question to that is, will this marijuana initiative bring any consistent form of funding?
You want to go first?
State legislators here, but yeah, go ahead.
So it's a great question, and I couldn't agree more. I'm not going to go over the history of how we got here, but there have been other states that have successfully sued their state legislature, Washington being one of them, for not properly funding education. And the courts have said, actually, no, the states, as required by the U.S. Constitution, their number one priority is funding education properly. Back when funding was in the decline for the state, the people of the state passed an amendment that said, no, you have to fund education. But if you don't, you can write a report and tell us why you didn't. It's that fatal flaw. There's a conflict between the 2 clauses of that amendment that everybody in the state, it passed overwhelmingly, said, yes, we want to make sure that they fund. But people took it to court and said, nope. So we could change that. And I, just at our last board meeting, said I would be happy to work with anybody who wants to put together a ballot and put that forward, to just remove that clause, the part, or write a report. That's all we have to do. So I've been advocating for that. We've been in the state legislature really aggressively the last 2 years. Last year was a little bit funny because it's kind of an off year. They're back in regular session now, and we saw great success. We combined with other school districts in the state to make sure that our legislators knew that as a percent of the budget, education has been diminishing while other services have been growing. So it's not just about money, but there are lots of things that interplay with that. Our legislators heard us. My worry is that this year they're going to say, oh, we increased your funding last time, we've done our job. And so to have the passion that you just had, that it is not adequately funded, and this volatility,
Right.
even if we're in an
Right.
upswing right now, we know what will come. The economy does not stay on its way up all the time.
Right.
We have to look at other funding mechanisms and more tax structure. The tough part is that when you ask the public, people have done lots of polls, the governor have done polls, business associations have done polls, liberal organizations have done polls. Everybody says as soon as you say tax reform, people take a huge step back and they say, whoa, we're not sure we're that serious. And so we catch ourselves in that balance. I'm not going to take up all the time, but I do want to say that as far as funding the building, I don't know if you heard, but we just had a report from the staff recommendation for the next the next 3 high schools for the next bond in 2016. Lincoln was recommended as being one of those. All of our schools are in disrepair. All of them are at a safety risk in terms of an earthquake. We cannot wait. When we passed the first one, it was intentionally a 32-year program. When we get through 32 years, we will have modernized all of our schools so that nobody has to worry about their kid going to school and an earthquake, or worry about the water, or worry whether or not there's adequate sunlight or space, or whether we're going to build out their cafeteria. These conditions speak clearly to our kids that they aren't our priority.
Right.
So,
Ruth, do
I
you
don't
want to
think
add
I-
anything?
Yeah, no, you said it really
I
well,
just
Greg.
get so fired. I
No,
could
I
go on
know.
for hours.
I know, and again, I mean, what Greg's referring to is, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the quality education model. This is the state's own model. They have a commission that studies every 2 to 4 years, every biennium, what it would take. I believe it's to have 90% of kids meet standards, and it's not a Cadillac education. It's a librarian in every school. It's art in every school. It's a longer school year. It's all the things that we all want and our kids all deserve and should have. But again, that's where they come out and say we're about $2 billion short of that statewide. 117 million more would be coming to Portland Public Schools if the quality education model were funded the way the Constitution says it's supposed to be, but there's a report that says
So
they
I
can't
just
do it.
have to say,
Yeah.
you know, this thing about 32 years out, that earthquake is within 30 years of now, so
Right.
it could hit any time.
Yeah.
Right,
And I don't know if you guys remember what happened in China,
right. No,
right?
that's why.
And everybody thought, oh, that's China. Can you believe how corrupt they are and all that? Here we are, we have all our systems and due process in law, and we are waiting for the same exact kind of thing to happen
Absolutely.
to us. It's inexcusable. And 32 years, it's too far out. You need a grant.
Well,
has to
that's
just be
actually
done
on
and
our-
overhauled.
I believe that's on our legislative agenda as
And I forgot to
well.
mention that part. but
Yeah,
yes.
we're
the
also
state
trying
bond.
continually to get the
wait.
state.
Well,
Right, so in the meantime, with the bond that we have right now, there was how many, I don't know how many had seismic, about 60 schools.
63.
Yeah, 63 schools from grades K through 8 were touched. I don't know how many of those had seismic, but a good number. Just because that was what we heard when we went back out the second time for the bond, after the first one narrowly failed, that has to be one of the highest priorities, along with roofs, obviously, because we had roofs that were just dripping down on kids and teachers.
What about asbestos tiles?
That too, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
it's a lot.
can't, it's unspeakable.
Right, so all what we're doing is we're starting now. We've got, thanks to the voters, we've got a bond and we're moving forward and we're gonna go through as quickly as we can. And so again, we've got 3 schools and 3 high schools. We decided to prioritize those because A, everyone in the district eventually will be going to a high school, and B, it means that you wouldn't have the disruption of having to be moved out of a high school, a middle school that's being rebuilt, and then again a high school. So the plan is to go through all of our high schools first, again, as quickly as we can, but we know, yeah, it's been a long time
Are
coming.
there federal funds available?
We have been using, to modernize,
We occasionally get some grants, like
Yeah.
Alameda High School, we were able to get a $6 million grant to do some seismic funding. So we try to tap every resource we can. Just so people are really clear, the school board itself doesn't have control over any funding other than the local funding, which is our local levy, and we have gone out for a local levy. It just got renewed. Thankfully, 72%, the biggest renewal ever. So the community is with you, everybody is with you. Our current levy pays for 600 teachers. Next year it'll pay for 640, 650 teachers. So it allows us actually to have some of the smaller class sizes, believe it or not, in the state, which is pretty pathetic. But just to give you some sense of that reality, that's what our local levy is helping us. And the other thing that we are able to do is to go out and ask for a capital facilities bond, which we again have done and we're planning to do again. So That's the control we have, other than doing what you're doing and what all of us should be doing, which is going to the state and going to the federal government and lobbying. So Greg, I know, went last year to lobby in DC. I have been going for the last 8 years to lobby. Things like special ed funding. Right now, the federal government only pays us 40% of the cost of special needs kids.
Yeah.
And so there was a commitment that it
20%.
would pay, considerably more than that once upon a time. So we're all in this together. We're doing what we can at the local level to raise local monies with our community support. But, other than that, it's just lobbying folks, which is what this campaign, by the way, is all about. So, and I would love to have your help in.
And I don't want to belabor the point, but we do have the option. We could move faster than the 32-year bond program. What we originally said with the first bond program is that we were going to keep the tax rate to approximately $2 per thousand square per assessed value. If our voters say 32 years is too long, we want to move faster. If we hear from our community, do $2.50, do $3 per assessed, we do have that authority as far as a bonding facility for the facilities. We've maxed out our local levy for teachers. But if that's the feedback we get, that 32 years is too long, we could do that. But right now, we are still operating under the premise of our first bond, which was that we committed to voters that we would come back again in 4 years and aim for that $2. But we could do more.
So yes.
My name is Heather Gaetan. I'm a West Sylvan and Lincoln parent. And so if the bond passes and Lincoln gets rebuilt, I believe my current sixth graders would be a senior when that happened. Would you really bus them? I live in Forest Heights. Would you really bus them to Marshall for their senior year? That seems like they'd have to leave at like 6 in the morning.
No, they would not be bused. So what she asked about was what would happen during the building of Lincoln High School. Where would our kids be or go? And would they be bused all the way out to Marshall High School? So Marshall High School is being used as a swing space, first for Franklin, then for Grant. Lincoln High School, actually, we believe the kids will actually stay here on site, the same as what's happening with Roosevelt High School. Roosevelt High School, the kids are staying on site and will be moved to different parts as they're built. Lincoln High School, the expectation is we may build on where the soccer field currently is, and the kids would actually be here and then be able to move over, which is a real gift for our community. We would have to find space for athletics, so it's not that it would be easy, but it's easier than being bused out to Marshall. So, other questions? No, let you guys answer.
There are 7 seats up front if somebody wants to.
Yeah, there's lots of seats up
You
here.
don't have to. You're welcome to stand in back, but I just want to make sure.
So there was somebody back here first, and then I'll come to you. Yes.
My name's Brian Sikorik, and I'm with the Lincoln Band Boosters here. And my appeal is going to be on behalf of music. But so that doesn't sound so self-centered, I'd like to expand it to actually the arts, which we keep hearing about in education. And for my son is a senior here, and for the 12 years that I've been with this Portland community, we keep hearing about the value of arts and how it impacts. I don't know what I can tell you any differently that you haven't heard already 100 times over. But what I can tell you about my experiences at this school and the commitment of our families. We just closed out our wreath sale this week where I spend the evenings counting out checks. It was cute when I was a Cub Scout leader, and it was cute when I was with the Nathan Thomas soccer tournament trying to collect $2,000 for a field tournament or maybe for a trip to the OMSI. But here we are using wreath sales and begging, and again, the families are stepping up. We're collecting wreaths so that we can pay for school buses so they can go to practice fields, because we actually have to compete for that one field to allow our students to practice their gift. We have to take them across town and pay for the buses. We have to pay for the porta-johns so they can relieve themselves. We have to pay for the meals when they're at competitions, the registration fees. It blew me away because when I was here this freshman year, I was thinking, they don't need me. That's what the budget is for. That's what your job is. And that I apologize for. And once I discovered the truth that basically it covers the band room and the band director, and that everything from sheet music to, like I said, the buses, we have to rate. You know, we sell Bob's Red Mill oatmeal to fund this. And it's not sustainable. And we're asking, what are your plans to incorporate the arts more into our children's future so that my son isn't left with the legacy? Every time we hold up a $75 check, we're saying, this is how much your future is valued. That's a beautiful video, but when will we see the actual backing for it? Because I'm told Well, some programs charge $1,200, say it's athletics or something, so maybe we ought to just charge the children if they want to participate. I'm not a jock, I don't disparage those who pursue athletics, but very few of us are going to make it to that NFL ring. Yet music touches every single child in whatever endeavor, and whether or not any of you carry a perfect pitch or a flat note, myself, I'm tone deaf. But music touches everything, and it also enhances our education. I think there's a real investment opportunity. You're no doubt aware of it. What is the plan so that we can somehow see that music is valued as equally as the academic pursuits, the technology, you name it? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we all in agreement with you as well. I mean, music is one, music and the arts, and our libraries, and athletics, all of these have been places that have been disinvested over the last years, again, from Measure 5 on. So we have cut down to bare bones, and it's not acceptable. We have asked our parents across the district to fundraise and fundraise and fundraise. I'm a parent too. I've been in the system since 1996, so yes, it's not acceptable. And again, it gets back to how our state funds education. And yes, we are in charge of making the local decisions, and we know that year after year, when we make those trade-offs, there's things that are not getting funded that we want to have for our kids. I feel like we're beginning, the city did the arts tax, which helped a little bit, and I believe we funded in arts, we had no district-wide, we call them teachers on special assignment, basically someone who's looking at this program district-wide. I believe we had no arts TOSA, but now we do. And I just want to acknowledge that our wonderful superintendent, Carol Smith, is in the room listening, so thank you, Carol, for being here. And she comes to these and listens to everybody. So we do have that, and a number of us have been calling for this for a number of years, but again, we're in that trade-off. Outdoor school, another one, cut back to 3 days. It should be 5 days. So we're going into another budget cycle this year, and we have begun, under Carol's leadership, to build back athletics, and we have middle school athletics for the first time, another area where without that program at the younger grades, it's really hard to have a strong program later on. Athletics, like music, is something that, and the rest of the arts is something that we know engages kids, and it's a really important part of their education. So again, it's part of this building back. It's going to be, but with the legislature only beginning to turn the corner on investment in education, we're a long way from where we need to be. So as we go into the budget process again this year, we take the input we hear everyone's priorities, and we try to do our best to make those trade-offs. But again, we need the legislature to continue to reinvest in education, because otherwise there's going to continue to be tough trade-offs. And if you guys want to add in.
I was just going to add one thing, and thank you for all the work that you do to support our kids, and that everybody in here does to support our kids. I've been on the board for 12 years, and 10 of those years we were cutting between $10 and $40 million a year. And so what we were doing was to try to preserve what we could. And the reason for that is both that we had our state revenue is mostly income tax. And we have property tax limits, and we have no sales tax. And so during the recession, our budgets went like this. And at the same time, the state was investing more in human services and in public safety. Human services made a ton of sense. During a down economy, more and more people had needs, and they were investing less and less in public education. It is exciting that we are getting some support from the city in terms of K-5 arts, and it's exciting that we are looking at a K-12 articulation. We know that that's where we want to go and where we need to be. And I think that we're going to start getting there, which is pretty exciting. So one of the things that we look at in our next budget cycle is you always have kind of the ongoing expenses, or you have the one-time expenses, and we always look at those depending on what our funding looks like. One time could be instruments, for example, to support a band program, or uniforms, or whatever it might be. So those are the things that we look at as we go. And our last budget was the first budget that, since I've been on the board, that we've actually been able to add back, and we really focused on getting more teachers in the classroom. We hired 200 more teachers, and we added 2 days. So those were the two really big investments that we made. I think there's an incredible yearning for us to now focus on our students even more, and I think that would be the band programs, the athletic programs, the outdoor schools, some of those things where our kids can touch and feel and experience their learning. So, we're with you, and please engage in the next budget cycle and make sure that that voice is in the mix.
And can I just add, as a former music teacher, I might get a little emotional. I appreciate people holding on to that and understanding what the arts bring to education. Because when it's done right, I promise you, if a kid was in my music class, they were going to learn how to read. Because they were going to have to learn how to read music, and it's the same concept. And it's going to be more engaging for probably 70 or 80% of the kids. So I ask you, I feel like apologizing for asking you to count checks, because unfortunately people have found a way to sustain this crazy system, and I ask for your help in making sure that we don't, people can disagree with our budget decisions all they want. That's totally normal, but don't get lost in the details to still not understand how big the problem is. When so many schools in the state cannot fund a full day of high school schedules, there is something wrong. This is not any one district being irresponsible. It is, as Bobby pointed out, it is us trying to hold a core semblance of education while people look the other way. I will say that in my 3 years on the board, as I'm going into my 4th year, I have been more hopeful than I have been in the time that I've been in Oregon, meaning that I believe that there is a new generation, and I'm not making this about age, but that we have hit bottom, we're tired of complaining, and that we are, in fact, beginning to build back systemically. So campaigns like this, right, sound great, feel fluffy, whatever, but we have to get the general public. Remember, in Portland, 80% of people in Portland, adults, do not have kids in schools. We have to get them to realize, to remember that this is our future. This is where our Social Security, this is where our funding is going to come from. If you don't have kids, this is the promise for tomorrow. We have to build that narrative instead of, oh, isn't government corrupt and aren't they terrible people? So I wish I could answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I talked to a lot of students across the district who all have this concern, and Lincoln even has it better than a lot of other schools. And what I tell them is just to write to your state elected officials, let them know that we need more funding and to participate in this, because it's through campaigns like this we're going to get more change in the state level. Then we can create change in PPS as well. We need the money, and we want to invest in arts too, but we need the money as well.
One of the things that's really exciting is that Mina came with us with several students from Portland Public Schools to Washington, D.C. last time so we actually had that student presence. It's a lot harder for a legislator or a congressman to blow you off when you have a student sitting there telling them the truth. So, yes?
I guess I'm a business owner. I kind of view things strategically, and when I look at the system, like you guys said, we got revenue, which is funding, we got costs, right? And I'm Keith Wood. I have kids in the public schools at Sylvan and Lincoln. So I look at it as a business with revenue. We've talked about the funding issue, right? And then I look at the costs. So, for me, structurally we've got some issues, and then once you look at the costs, it's people and facilities. Everything else doesn't matter, right? So our facilities, we've already taken out the investment, but I always worry that structurally, if you're looking, and I turn around companies, what we're doing on the people side, for example, is just the lifetime value of teachers, which I think are big, but if you go look at it, basically they're retiring at 53 years old. And we're basically giving them, depends what calculation you want to do, $1 million to $2 million check when they leave at 53, and we've got to find funding for that. Every teacher we add will retire. And we're basically, if you go do the calculation, I hope you guys do, they're all millionaires. I think that this funding issue is, with these structural issues, are never going to go away. All we're doing is kicking the can. I just don't know how structurally to get ahead of it. And then I would say on top of it, I think I feel like, and with a lot of parents I talk to, that they would be willing to fund more if they felt their dollars were being invested, you mentioned investments, a little bit better. And I worry about that because, we all have these bad teachers, and 95% of the teachers are great. And 5% of them are protected. And it seems like we spend 80% of our time protecting the 5%. And that's also wrong. And it tarnishes everything else when we go back out for funds. No one wants to fund it because they remember the one teacher that didn't teach, and you try to get them out of the system, you can't, right? And then on top of it, just a lifetime. Most people are retiring at 65. Now they're talking about even longer in the real world. And I just think structurally it's an issue when we're asking people to fund millionaires, really. And you do your calculation and verify the numbers. I just went to salary.com before I came and looked at it, and that's basically the estimate. So I don't know, what do you do on the cost side? Because I think on top of it on the facilities too, I just want to add that, you look at these things like the Vista Bridge, where they put that fence up and they say that it costs something like $250,000. And a business owner like me goes, that would cost me $50,000. And you say, how come that's 5x when it's in the government? And I know this is sort of a taboo subject. It's a difficult one because we have so many great teachers, but it's one that you guys, I feel, have to tackle if we're going to get out of this vicious cycle, because I don't think we are. I mean, they could fund us for a long time, and we could find the way we're structuring these contracts, the way we're constructing the construction contracts, you'll never have enough. And that's what I worry about. Anyways, I don't know thoughts.
Well, thanks for your comments. A few comments and responses, other folks can certainly chime in. So, I guess I just would say, I don't know any teachers that are in this profession to make a ton of money. And in terms of the PERS, the Public Employee Retirement System, again, you can discuss all day the ins and outs of that system, but again, I'm not seeing public employees, by and large, getting huge benefits out of that. It's something that, in my opinion, they have earned.
Do the numbers, don't give opinions. Go run the numbers. I don't think they came into this to be millionaires.
But they are, with all due respect, they're not millionaires. I don't know any teachers who are billionaires.
Yeah.
If you go look at the numbers, and you retire at 53, and you're handed 70% of your pay for life with 0% medical, it adds up to over $1 million. It's like giving a person, you would have to have $1 million in your retirement account to live the same life they had, or more, to put your numbers together. I'm happy for them, right? I am. Don't get me wrong. I'm especially happy for the 50% that are awesome, right?
So just if I could continue.
Yeah.
So right now there are a number of reforms that were done, and PERS, labor costs, we're a people business, right? So it is a huge salary and retirement benefits. It's what, because we need to compensate our folks. So the legislature, which controls the system, did make some reforms which are going to really significantly help reduce the costs for school districts around the state. And right now, as you probably know, they are being reviewed by the Supreme Court. So we are anxiously awaiting to hear that. We're hoping that they will be sustained, because it is something that is really an issue for the financial sustainability of districts around the state. At the same time, acknowledging that our public employees deserve a decent and dignified retirement for the work that they put in on behalf of our kids.
Especially if people are retired, it shouldn't be changed on them.
Could we have everybody speak up?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so in terms of evaluation for teachers, in not this last contract negotiations, but the one before, the big reform that we collaborated with on the teachers union was to the evaluation system, and I'm really proud and excited about that. It had not been changed since the 1980s, I believe. And so, and some of the principals might be able to speak to this here. So this is a huge piece of their job, hugely important part of their work, as you know, as leaders in the building, to evaluate our teachers. And I believe that, and I hope they agree too, that our new evaluation system that we collaborated on with the union, and that is based on national models, does give us the tools when we have teachers who need additional support to be able to tell them specifically, not just in it used to be very, very vague. Now there's a specific rubric and standards that make sense from an educational perspective about where exactly you need to improve. And while there are still many protections in the contract, there are ways in which, and I think we have supported every single time when staff has said, you know what, we've done this evaluation and this teacher has had a plan of support and they still need it, and they still are not making it, then we have exited them. But it's really important that we are providing supports for all our teachers to be the best they can be, and I think this new system is one that it is a professional development system rather than been a punitive one. I don't know if other folks want to weigh in.
So I'll add two things. One is the public employee retirement system is a statewide system. It covers school employees, county employees, city employees, state employees, police, firefighters. So it's actually not something that we have any control over. We certainly can provide input, and again, I think we have a voice there to provide some input. And the other thing I would say is in our last contract, I think we got one really great thing out of it, and that was working again with our teachers. Our teachers approved this, which is we're out in the market hiring early now for teachers. It used to be that we had 3 rounds of internal hiring, and so we were out really late in the market, and people were scooping up even our own student teachers that we had trained. And so now we're out in the market earlier. We're finding that we're able to hire more minority teachers, more bilingual teachers, more higher level science and math high school teachers. I'm noticing in schools when I'm meeting new teachers, and I don't know if this is true or not, I need to ask the superintendent at some point, it seems like we're hiring more male teachers in the mix. So if you look at the teachers that have been hired at Lincoln or at your own schools, I think that over time we're going to see that because we're out in the market earlier and we're able to scoop up, the best and the brightest of the new teachers coming out of school, it'll give us a real leg up as we go too in terms of our kids and the teacher in front of. I mean, everyone knows the most important thing in your kids' educational life outside of the parents is the teacher in front of them in the classroom. So agree completely.
Can I jump in just real quick?
One more. And then let's.
So I hear your concerns about the structure, and it's been an age-old debate. And I just there are a couple things that I heard you say that I would take a step back from. So to say that, right, somebody retires at 50-something, you're handing them $1 million check when they're out, they're millionaires. Well, to say that what you earn in the next 20 years, even in retirement, added up, given in one check makes you a millionaire, I mean, anybody that's worked 20 years and made $70,000 would be then a millionaire. And we don't typically call them that because they're not making $1 million each year, for example. So the framing, I hear what you're saying. The second piece.
It's just hard at 53. That's
right.
My point.
Totally get it. And I think that we are in a significant shift right now with, this one is age-related with generations, that I don't think folks my age are expecting to retire at 55 or 65. I think that we're expecting to work longer, and so I think we're trying to honor some commitments that were made when somebody started in the profession 30 years ago or 20 years ago, as we continue to make that transition. You heard the state legislature really look at PERS as a cost containment savings. Whether or not they went far enough or didn't go far enough, I hear people on both sides, and I have my own opinion, and it doesn't really matter because I'm not in control of it. As far as cost structure, I actually think we did a really nice job. I don't want to relive the contract negotiations, but there was a real disagreement about what compensation should look like, and we were not portrayed very nicely for the position that we took, but it was based on an understanding that we need to look at this cost control structure and do our due diligence to make sure kids are having the best education possible. I know some teachers that were happy with that, and I know some teachers that were really upset at that. And so it's not one side or the other, there are just different opinions. So I appreciate what you're saying. I also want to reflect back that when I talk with other local officials, elected leaders, they have a tendency to look at me and they say, so why'd you run for the school? Why did you do that? And I got it so many times, I started asking, I said, well, what do you mean? And they looked at me and they're like, you don't control the revenue. So when you're at the county and you're at the city, they actually, and I'm not begrudging them, actually I just became a county employee, but they have more generous benefits than our teachers. The difference is the county and the city have many, many more ways to raise revenue. We have a local levy, and we have the state. They can raise a gas tax, they can raise a tobacco tax, they can do an alcohol tax, they can do a street fee, they can do a
Marijuana tax?
marijuana tax. They have a whole number of options to raise revenue that we don't have access to. And so I just want to caution us to say that it's the public employees, because there are systems and costs and revenue streams that actually make sense and are sustaining it, that aren't necessarily in trouble. It's this revenue side that's really heavy. And the third thing, or the fourth thing, or whatever number I'm on, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, because we have a bond, and I wasn't sure if you said the way contracts are let, if you were referencing any part of our bond. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that even though costs are significantly increasing, partly because of Beaverton's successful bond, now we have more competition for the same people bidding for the work. Our bond programs have been coming in at or under budget. So we've been doing a good job of managing with what we have and trying to find the most cost-efficient way. But the state controls a lot of this, including some of the due process included for teachers. Teachers have 2 years to get support before they're allowed to leave, unless they do something completely irresponsible that you can terminate them for. So.
One follow. I mean, I'm all for the funding piece.
Yeah,
Just, if
no, I
the
know.
funds aren't there, you guys don't control it. You only have costs.
Absolutely.
But why would it be so hard in that last contract? Because I don't want to do anything to the past retirees. God, I mean, what we promised them, they deserve, right?
Mm-hmm.
But going forward in these new contracts, why was it so hard to just say, look, you need to work to 59 and a half? Why is that so hard for them to say, yeah, you're right? Because when I talk to the teachers and like over a beer, they're like, yeah, we don't mind. A lot of us do, right? I mean, why is that so hard? It just seems like it would free up funds for all the other things we want to do. Not all. It's not going to solve a lot of our problems, but it's one piece.
You're talking about the funding at the larger level for
Yeah.
the retirement system versus what we pay. Actually, as teachers, the more experience they have, the higher they go in the pay scale.
It hurts us.
So actually, we really value our experienced teachers, but as new teachers are hired, they start usually lower on the salary scale. So,
it almost helps you.
well, I'm just saying it's not as none of this. There's never a simple answer to any of these pieces. So.
So I think we're getting lost a little bit on PERS. I followed this quite a bit. I was involved in the lawsuit. I helped recruit the plaintiffs that Greg made reference to. Teachers hired after 1996, and somebody else in this room probably knows better than I, don't get Tier 1 PERS anymore. That's gone. That cohort of people are moving through the system. So some of those anecdotes that are so outrageous or painful, those are gone.
Yeah.
That teachers that are hired after 1996 are under a much more normal retirement. There probably are teachers in
And
this
they
room
pay
who
their
could tell you.
pickup.
I'm sorry?
They pay their pickup.
Yeah, so the story that you are advancing is not true for most teachers anymore. And so to the extent that they've taken care of that concern about the expenditure, then I'm signing you up with me to go work on revenue. Because we're 10% below the national average. We're making that mistake historically ongoing. You get what you pay for.
At the state level, we're 10%.
You bet.
below.
And the local folks vote to support the levy. We vote to support the bonds. But in the reality is the state has to do its job. So I'll talk to you after the meeting. I'd love to have no, because I think the business voice, to be really fair, the business voice has to focus on, okay, what are we paying for, how are we paying for, and what do we get? So
any other questions? Yes.
If you could speak to the urban renewal money that I know was the selling point of us renewing the levy early, a year early. And what are the plans for that urban renewal money? And I've heard that Portland State may be trying to negotiate to take some of it. So I just wondered what your plans are.
So, yeah, I think it's sort of two different questions. In terms of the levy, I can answer that question. When we passed our levy in 2011, the levy is a teacher levy, so it's operating dollars to pay for teachers, and that's what it goes toward. We actually have an account set up that indicates where those monies are and how many teachers it pays for. What we discovered, and it was actually an employee in our communications department discovered, is that as the levy monies were collected to pay for teachers, as we all said we wanted, we discovered that the monies that were collected in urban renewal areas weren't actually coming to us. They were staying in the urban renewal area. And so we proactively went to the city and we said, hey, that was never the intention of voters, that when we pass a teacher levy, you get a windfall. And the city agreed with us. And so then we went to Salem together with the city, and we got the law changed going forward, which is always what they'll do, is if you have a levy on the books, that's what people voted for, so it only applied going forward. So the reason we went out so quickly again is to take advantage of that new law. And as a result, that $4.5 million, it's really actually $7.5 million, but with compression, and I don't even want to get into that, it ends up being about $4.5 million next year will be collected, and from the urban renewal areas that will come to us also, which will allow us to pay for about 645 to 650 teachers next year. So, yeah, it's amazing that we got this passed. It's just a nice sort of windfall for us.
Can I follow up with that? So you also said something about Portland urban renewal and PSU.
Yeah.
So I think it was the last year that Mayor Sam Adams was mayor. He created what was called an education urban renewal district that included Lincoln and stretched all the way down to PSU and kind of followed this idea. And the idea was, right, that you can use then urban renewal for to help advance or to help support education purposes in those districts, to try to, again, leverage some ideas for Portland State and actually for us. When Mayor Charlie Hales came in, he pulled everybody back around the table and said, hey, you know, we know this is taking money from here, and we're not sure this was a best idea. And he began to work with the partners again to figure out how could they reconfigure it to still advance the goals of the educational institutions and not cost basically the city of Portland and its taxpayers the money that it was costing ongoing. And so I haven't been updated that probably in the last 6 or 7 months. The last I heard of it, Portland State's not trying to take any of our urban renewal money. I'll just assure you of that. But there is still talks, and as you heard about the bond that we might be proposing for 2016, if Lincoln's rebuilt, we would look for partnership opportunities with Portland State University, and so we would look at what that looks like. So we would be working together to figure out, along with the city, because it's obviously in the city's best interest. They understand that education is a core value that the city residents want. So we'd be working with them to figure out how that would work.
So other questions? Yes.
My name is Abby Schwartz, and I have a Sylvan child and and a Lincoln child. You might be aware, I wrote my question so I remember what to say. You might be aware of the need that Lincoln students have for a safe place to sit and study, especially during free periods. And when all 1,600-ish students have to eat at once in 33 minutes, they really need a place to grab a bite and sit down. I don't know if you've seen the hallways, but it's crowded. Logistically, these needs are not being met by the current Lincoln facilities. I'm a part of a group of parents and students which is working toward a solution utilizing a space right over there next to Lincoln, and we're open to any assistance or ideas you might have to help us make this happen. How can we count on your help?
So I didn't say before, but I was a parent at Lincoln High School also. I have 2 sons who graduated up through East Sylvan, West Sylvan, Lincoln High School. So I'm certainly aware of the problems you're talking about, and I think they've only gotten worse in the last couple of years since my last son graduated. I think if you have any creative ideas on facilities, I would ask you, first of all, talk to Peyton. But also John Isaacs is in the back here, and I would encourage you to talk with him as well. I think we're open to any and all ideas to give some relief here. I think everyone's realizing that the facility is lacking and we're very overcrowded, and I think we're open to creative ideas within some budget constraints. But yes, I think it would be awesome to hear more. So, and I would say that to everybody in the room. Peyton, do you want to respond?
No, I just Neri had her hand up for a while.
Yes. Oh, well, both of you did, so go ahead. And could you step out so people can hear you too? So go ahead. Thank you.
So we'd like to go back to the music and how music and arts in general isn't being funded properly by the district, and I'm not sure if it's just a problem in PPS, but I'm guessing it's a problem in Oregon and everywhere, because when you think about it, education, science, English, math, they're all first, and then they put music and arts like last. But as a student who's been actively in music, and like Elliot too, music is a really important part, and just art in general, an important part of education. You can't have a full, well-rounded education without music. And this isn't just, it sucks for the parents. The parents have to put so much money in. Like, he counts checks. Our parents give money, and it's not just for music, but other programs too in the school that are
that are kind of put as, you know, not, how would you say it?
Higher priority.
Yeah, they're not prioritized at all, and they really benefit to our education because it's not just learning math and it's not just learning to write, but it's also learning how to connect with others through music, connect with others through art, because this is the way, as humans, we all connect. I mean, if you play a song, somebody from China who doesn't even speak your language will be able to relate to you in that way, and that's such an important connection to have. If you don't have it, like even starting from elementary school, I mean, sure, we might have really great scientists, but will they be able to connect to the person sitting next to them? So music is really important and should definitely be prioritized.
Thank you.
I just like to build off that. I'm assuming everybody here likes music and listens to music. Okay, any parents in the crowd who have students in the music program, raise their hand. Awesome. Do you guys know how much funding the music program gets in dollars? Zero.
Well, it gets teachers. It gets teachers, but yeah.
It gets teachers, but in terms of equipment or anything we need, $0. That means that anything that the music program needs, instruments, equipment, uniforms, all has to be fundraised. And we go year-round. We have so much parent help. That's what helps us fund everything. Music has always been such an important part in my life, and I would really contribute it to helping me earn very good grades. There have been many, many studies done linking to involvement in music programs and higher grades. If you look at this piece of paper here, you can see that Lincoln has the highest graduation rate of any Portland public school, and I believe that we have one of the strongest music programs here, thanks to Mr. Aaron Barnes and others. And I know I've had lots of friends that have struggled in school and have come into the music program, and they get so focused that that focus carries over into all other subjects, and they bring their grades up. Conversely, students who are already in the music program and say, I need more time to focus on this class or on this sport, their grades tend to drop. I wouldn't call it a phenomenon, but it's a definite relationship. It's just so important in everybody's life. It sort of confounds me how we don't place any priority on it by not funding it. I don't know if you guys control any stream of revenue and direct how it's appropriated.
That's probably good.
Yeah. I love what you're saying, and I'm glad that our superintendent is here to hear that as well. You know, the school board does a budget process in the, actually it's just coming up. And a lot of the budget is already determined in advance. I mean, we have teacher salaries, administrator salaries, healthcare, and the rest. But we do have some discretionary budget. And I would really encourage both of you to come and testify during the budget process. We have budget hearings. I would love to hear from as many students as possible during that process. I can tell you when my oldest son came through Lincoln, there was no band here. And Erin Barnes was brought on by Pate. I mean, she's made a huge difference in turning this from what was kind of a college-focused, dry, sort of boring high school. I mean, honestly, when my first son came here, I kind of wondered, why is everyone talking about this school? It just was boring. And it's not anymore. And, you know, so much of what makes a school great is a really incredible building leader who can work with the teachers and work with the community and bring in programs and people like Erin Barnes. So I don't know what to tell you other than I hope you'll show up and I hope you'll testify. And I think we're at a position finally where we are seeing some more incremental dollars coming into the system. And so we can hopefully have some impact.
And I just want to highlight and remind, I don't know anybody on the school board who wouldn't love to invest in music, right? I want to make sure that we get reminded that as we have these little tussles over this amount or that amount, we understand that there is a bigger problem. I mean, if we fund music today, we will lose something tomorrow, something that is equally loved by somebody, whether it's sporting or whether it's drama or whether it's, I would even say, we're going to have higher class sizes. We're going to have science teachers that aren't quite teaching in their discipline because they had to go between this school and that school. Right now it's a zero-sum game until we can increase the revenue. So yes, come testify to us, but I'm asking, and again, we can disagree about what the funding priorities are, but let us not let that distract us from what I think is the more important issue and the only issue that's going to actually get us to something much closer than what we're looking for.
Yes, and then we'll come to you.
So I think this is actually a broader, it all plays into the same thing. I mean, I applaud you for your wreaths. My kids are both basketball players, and we were selling Mother's Day bouquets and doing parking. So I think we know that at Lincoln we're very fortunate actually, because we are able to do that. And so one of the reasons that we have Constitution team, we have music, we have the cooking classes, because the parents are writing checks or they're able to do this. And then of course, then you look over at other schools that are not allowed or don't have the ability to do that. So half the time I'm feeling tapped out by all the checks I'm writing, and half the time I'm feeling guilty because I'm writing the checks, then the kids at Roosevelt aren't getting. So I know you don't have the answer to that because the answer is the revenue, but I feel that this is contributing to the divide we have and the equity lens.
Yes.
Because we're trying to keep what we know our kids need through writing checks, and other parents at other schools can't do that.
And I guess that's what I was trying to hold up, is let's not continue to be against each other. Let's unite and say, we know every kid deserves this, so whether or not you can or they can't, let's aim our direction at the right place and figure this out. So thank you.
Yes.
So my name is Kate, and I've got a freshman and a senior here, and I've been a long time involved. And I feel like we are testifying here, and many of us cannot make it to the school board meetings because we're running foundation meetings, or we're working, or we're babysitting, or we're washing our cars, or we're running meetings at the schools. So this is this is just a process thing. I don't want to talk about revenue. We are testifying, and so it's kind of frustrating, if I might say, for you to say, you need to come testify. That is the most beautiful testimony I've seen. Well, somebody did, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My point is we have no power. Literally. That is metaphorical.
Well timed, But I forgot to take Bill.
I don't know if I should keep speaking, but we are testifying, and when I hear that, well, the school board hasn't heard, you need to go testify, it's like, we are writing checks, we are cheering for our kids, we are volunteering in the classrooms, we are driving them, we are making sure that the halls are safe. We are doing every single thing we can do aside from working 45 hours a week, aside from making sure that Portland is a good place to live. And I think that maybe we can testify in a lot of different ways, but it feels like so much rides on our testimony when I think we look at these two amazing kids, articulate beyond their years. That is incredible testimony. Let's take that back to the school board and say, we don't need a letter, we don't need an email, we don't need a testimony or a microphone. We had a town hall meeting, which is a really important venue for all of us to be here. And that should matter. And so I hope, and I'm glad that Carol's here, and please, could that be testimony? Can we just bank it? Can we have like testimony?
You got a video camera.
So it's just a point of process that please, we all need a little credit in the bank for doing what we're doing, and that if you don't hear from us in every single way, we are there. And that's just, and I'm not aiming it at you.
I know.
It's like you have to choose person.
And I
Thank
totally
you.
get it, and it's actually part of why we did this is, I mean, for as long as I've been on the board, there isn't enough opportunity to engage in this kind of dialogue. Even if you come testify at the board meeting, right? We listen to you for 3 minutes and we don't respond.
Right.
So it's not this kind of dialogue. So this is exactly, and so these testimonies are very powerful. Thank you.
And thank you all for being here tonight.
Yeah, and part of the reason I said come to a board meeting is our board meetings are televised, and I think our entire community and our legislators need to hear from our students because they're the ones who are most deeply impacted. So That's all I was trying to do. And I also think that it's helpful for our legislators to see how brilliant our students are, and that they are the promise, and they're worth the investment. So that's part of it too. Can you wait 1 second, because I know that others haven't gotten, if you haven't had a chance yet, yes, go ahead. And I'll try to get back to you.
I have 2 kids, Lincoln and Forest Park. And you know, you guys were talking about writing checks and fundraising, and I say you are lucky you can write checks and you can fundraise, because I have a problem that even writing check wouldn't help to solve it. And I wanted to talk about tag kids, tag identified kids, because basically there are no solutions for these kids in public schools. My older daughter was identified in 4th grade, and since then nothing happened. I tried in elementary school, I tried in middle school, now she's freshman in Lincoln, and I'm trying again, and I was very hopeful that something will be different here, but it turns out to be very, very difficult even here. And the fact is that there is no solution for such kids in public system. And basically, the last answer that I got, that there are other schools for such bright kids. And I'm asking, what other schools? Meaning of other schools is probably private schools, and I don't understand why should I send her to private school. She loves Lincoln, she loves to be here. We pay very high property tax. We bought this house to be here in these schools. Why should I send her to private school now? And I don't know, like everybody's talking about money, but maybe in this case it's not just money, maybe there are some other solutions too. And my younger daughter teacher asked me if I want to submit her for tag testing, and I'm going to do this, but honestly I don't know why should I know that it would not do any difference even if she passes this test. And you know, having gifted kids, it should be blessing, but it's being here in this public school system, it turns to be challenge and frustration most of the time, because basically you don't know what to do with these kids. And
thank you so much for highlighting another area that has suffered from disinvestment for our kids, which is our tag programs. So yes, we have, it's another one of those pieces where it's sort of a, pockets of opportunity, whether it's Lego robotics or Destination Imagination. I do feel like, particularly at the high school level, expanding opportunities around more hands-on and project-based career technical ed, and more dual credit opportunities, whether it's with PCC or Reed or other colleges. I feel like we're moving in the right direction in terms of just differentiated and more opportunities for kids who really want to accelerate. Obviously, our teachers are busting their butts to differentiate within the classroom as best they can. Of course, when you have 30 kids in a classroom or more, that's really tough to do. So
maybe there are other you could differentiate not within the classroom. Maybe they can learn in separate
we do
classrooms.
have,
I don't know. Maybe there are some other solutions, because I hear all the time about this differentiation, within the classroom, and it just doesn't work.
Right, our teachers, there's the challenges that our teachers are facing with the kids in our classroom are really, really tough to be able to do that. I agree.
And there is access school, which is only one school for the whole Portland school district, and it's, even if kids pass this test, the opportunity to get there is close to zero. The probability to get to the school is close to zero, and it's only one school, and if you live here and the school is there, it's not a solution.
Yeah, no, thank you. I agree. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
I'm presuming you've already done this, talking both to your principal and to your counselor to see what kind of differentiation could be offered, or whether there might be some opportunities at PSU or PCC, but I would encourage you to do that if you haven't done it already.
Come see me tomorrow.
See Peyton tomorrow.
What happens
So,
in the tag program in the States? I mean, it's different than other states. I'm just curious what.
Yeah, I
Is it
don't
one
know
of the
how it
things
works
that
in
fell
other
off in the
states.
budget cuts?
Pretty
or-
much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a question in the back, and then I'll get to you, okay? Yes.
Mine's a logistic question. Hey, I'm Lindsay, band mom, been through the ringer with many of you. Two things, one, guy in blue who brought up some of those issues, elephant in the room, like that you brought it up. One of the things that we did get in the last contract negotiations that I felt really good about was competency being in the classroom versus seniority. It's huge. I've been on both ends. Thank you to the teachers of Lincoln. First year, I'm not documenting. Thank you so much. I have a freshman and a sophomore here. I wanted to say to you, I've gone to some of the teachers with different issues. They've supported me and given me direction. There's a math teacher here that walks on water, Chuck Slusher. If your daughter's gifted, go to him. He'll help direct you. Kate, I testified a lot of times in front of the board. I don't know why you have this job. Honest to God, not once have I ever gotten a response from the board, from the superintendent, from any of my testimony, or from any of my letters. I have documentation. I always do. But going back to the core issue is logistics. This school is crowded. I have a freshman and a sophomore here. I know it's coming up in East and West. I don't need to see 5 years down the road. What's this school going to look like in September when I think it's the biggest class that West has ever had is going to be walking through these doors? We don't even have a cafeteria. So instead of looking to us to be creative, I need you guys to be creative. This is a creative city. I'm self-employed. I have a problem. I see it coming down the road. I see that metal costs are going up. I problem solve. I don't think this is fair to the kids. We have bad weather. They're crushed in here. It's unhealthy. And the thing that makes me so mad is we saw it coming. We see these numbers year after year. You budget plan on them. Why haven't we been more proactive in dealing with the overcrowding of this school rather than being reactive, which is just getting worse?
I'll start. There are a couple of things in there. I'm not sure where to start. So what are we doing? I'll start with the creativity, right? So how?
I'd like to start with why are we not proactive?
Okay, why are we not proactive? Great idea. So we have been going cluster by cluster to figure out enrollment balancing. We see an issue coming, and then we go through a process to figure out how we can resolve that issue. It probably won't surprise you that when we come up with a solution, pick a solution, any solution, communities have their own opinions about that. And oftentimes, they're opposing opinions. This group thinks it's fantastic, this group thinks it's not. Now, it's fair to say, well, why don't you just make a decision, right? Just pick one and make a decision, make people live with it. And I can't say why that hasn't been done in the past. I can say that we started that process most recently in the Jefferson cluster. And we realized that doing it cluster by cluster, right, everybody's boundaries touch everybody else's once you get out of that cluster. So we had to look at a whole system, but that's going to take time. And I hear you saying we don't have time, right?
Come back here.
Right, I know.
During the day. I mean, the kids can barely walk by here, and you know it's coming.
I've been here during the day. I know. That's what I'm saying. So two things. One, how do we be proactive? So that's why we decided to take a district-wide boundary review so that we could, because everybody knows, or most people know, that many of the boundaries that are in Portland were historical boundaries based on many, many things, many of which were flat-out racist. They were, we don't want black kids coming to this school, so we're going to draw the line here because that's where it starts. So that's a well-known history. In fact, to call it history, it was just 1980s when some of these things started to go away, so it's not too far ago. So we are being proactive in that sense. We are we're in the first, 11 months of a 24-month process to be proactive. No, exactly, it won't help you in September. I'll get back to that. That being said, but we have to do both, right? We have to deal with the immediate and we have to be proactive. So we don't have the choice to do one or the other. We have to do both.
I don't want you to do one.
Right, exactly, right. So I'm just speaking to one about being the proactive piece. The other piece, and just realize that it intersects, right, with facilities a little bit, that if we, if we, for example, had enough space here at Lincoln, we could just put more kids here. If we had more space at East Sylvan, we could put more kids there instead of shuttling. So it begins to interact with other issues such as facilities. Another one, so for example, we could have 2 years ago said, you know what, Lincoln's looking like it's going to be huge. We're going to lop off one of the feeder schools, 2 of the feeder schools, and we're going to send them to another school. My understanding from the folks I've spoken to in this community, that raises significant concern and frustration by them. And when we say come talk to us, what we hear when we're making those decisions is all the people who object and the people who are in favor actually sit down and get quiet. And that makes it really hard as an elected official to say, no, look, we have support for this. We have community backing, which is why we're saying go to the state legislature. If people say, yeah, fund it more, tax reform, never mind. It takes the wind out of an elected official to have the confidence to move in that direction, because we are elected officials. We are supposed to be representing. So I'll move off that. What are we doing for next year? It's a Tier 2. It's on our radar, which I don't know if you're familiar, Tier 1. There are some schools apparently that are even more crowded than Lincoln. So they're considered Tier 1 that need immediate action next year because they don't know what. Tier 2 means that they think they have at least 1 more year. Those plans are coming to us in the next 6 months about what we're going to do. I haven't seen the recommendation. I don't know if you've seen. So that's just the space issue here. There was something else you asked, but I don't want to take all the time.
Well, the space issue, I've been at, I think, 2 visioning meetings now with huge spans between them, years. I guess my level of I'm so mad that I'm shaking is that we, you know, and it's just like the guy in blue, who, elephant in the room, really like you, wish I knew your name so I could stop calling you guy in blue.
I'm going to call the elephant in the room.
I've been trying to lose weight.
You know, where, not that I love the portables, but that we if it's something that would function.
Right.
Do you know what goes through my head? And this can scare all of you, so I'm really sorry to say this. Is if there's an earthquake, and we have these many kids, and they're all crowded here, I'm not coming to school to pick up my kid. And the level of safety, and I'm crazy with safety, the people who have worked with me know this, it's terrifying, and I'm irritated that I've been to so many visiting meetings, and we're still only Tier 2.
So again, I couldn't agree more. And something in my 3 years I've seen on the board, whether it was contract negotiations, whether it's district-wide boundary review, whether it's actually addressing the racial disparities that exist, not just in our district, but across districts in urban areas, this board has stepped into those like never before. So the district has never, as far as we can tell, taken a district-wide boundary review, because we're tired of doing these 1 pieces by 2 pieces. This is the first time since 1995, which was a teeny one, and before that it was 1950s, to rebuild our schools. We are working, again, little disagreements here and there, little, oh, why'd you do that, why didn't you do that? This board, more than any other board that I've seen in the time I've been in Portland, which has only been about 15 years, has actually taken these head on and beginning to be proactive. There's significant pushback for people who like some things the way there are, but we are continuing on that vision to move it forward. So I hope that you're not going to sit through 5 more visioning sessions unless it's to design the new building so that it can help relieve the overcrowding.
The new building is the solution for now.
It's not. That's what I'm saying. So we're going to figure out what the solution is soon. Again, in the next 6 months is what I'm hearing. Portables, city gets in the way about their zoning issues, but we're going to come up with some solutions.
So there's somebody, yeah.
Hi, my name is Mark Feldman. I've got 2 kids in the district, and I also volunteer on the district's parent tag advisory council, so I kind of feel like I need to follow up a little bit after this woman's comments. In like 2012, the tag department sent out a survey to all tag parents, and the responses from that came back kind of in 2 camps. One camp, there was parents of access, everybody was happy. The other camp was basically everybody else in the whole district, all tag parents in the whole district, and nobody was happy. There were about a dozen questions, and there were very poor results for all schools except for access in the district. Many of the comments And I've read all the comments. Many of the comments were to the effect, well, what tag services? I didn't know there aren't any tag services. That's the first thing that happened. Last year, the Tag Advisory Council approved a set of recommendations for what we think would be very important measures, very important and concrete, I should say, measures that could be taken to improve tag services. Unfortunately, we didn't really say anything about high schools because we don't have any high school members, parents of high school students on the advisory council. But we had some, what we thought were things that could be implemented at all schools, are being implemented at some schools. And not only would a lot of them help tag students, but they would help all students. I guess one of the most interesting things that we said in there was that we had just come to the conclusion that the policy of providing tag services by saying that all teachers should differentiate for all children in all classrooms just doesn't work. The range of abilities of children in one classroom, for even the superhuman teachers that we have, is just too great. Okay, and so the measures, I won't go into the measures. You can go to the TAG website and look under the TAG Advisory Council to see everything that we recommended. But we think that there are things that could be done that help tag students and would reduce the range of abilities in classrooms, and so teachers could pay more attention to everybody. The other thing that we said that we would like to have considered is expanding access, because there's about 300 kids there right now. I count myself very lucky in that my children got in, but there's there's slightly under 300 kids on the waiting list right now, and that's insane, right? You've got 300 kids who are qualified. They wouldn't be on the waiting list unless they were qualified, and they can't get in. There's a variety of ways that could be addressed. You could drastically expand access. Right now, I think the plan is to have like 30 more openings next year. We need double that, right?
And I would say maybe we need something on this part of the city, because right to the access, it's from here, it's our one direction, and I know that in this cluster there are a lot of kids that in elementary school, in first part, there are a lot of kids that tag identified, and in Sylvan, and here we need something here, not there.
That's one of the things we suggested. Why don't you consider opening another one here? There's plus and minus. As part of the boundary review process, it seems like you could consider this kind of thing, right? Yes. You're addressing who goes to what schools. This would be a really good time to think about access and think about creating, what was supposed to be there, what the board originally approved, which was, access high school also, which is no longer exists, but it's supposed to be there, and it was approved by the board. And so, we'd really like you to consider that. So one of my questions is, would you consider that? Another question is, are you considering just looking at the whole tag situation? I realize that me talking to you here isn't enough. I have sent everybody, all the board members and superintendent, our report. So are you planning to consider the what we believe is a not great state of tag services in PPS?
Thank you. So I had 2 kids who were tag identified students also, and you're right, there's been very little extra that is offered to tag students, and that's historically been the case. We haven't been able to differentiate. In terms of the Access School, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's an alternative school in Portland Public Schools, and kids actually have to test in at the 97th or 98th percentile. And it's a K-8 at this point.
It's actually 99th percentile.
Okay.
So
even higher. Even higher.
The whole, other 2 percentile that we need to have something for one of the other schools.
And we really almost view these kids as special needs kids in some ways because they're so off the charts. And one of the recommendations that came out of the recent Sackett report, which is the Superintendent's Enrollment and Transfer group, is that we should be evaluating each of our focus programs. And I think in this case, Access would be considered a focus program for that purpose, to understand how well it's serving kids and to see whether we need more, or if it's not serving kids well, or if it's not different enough from other schools, whether we need less. So I think that Access, as far as I understand, will be in that mix as we go through and look at that evaluation. And in terms of, I just wanted to respond, in terms of talented and gifted kids, they're in every single cluster. We're not special here in the Lincoln cluster, and no cluster is special. There are talented and gifted kids all over this district. And it is hard when there's only one program that really supports the really, really high level kids. But I think that we have far more talented and gifted students who maybe aren't at the access level, but are talented and gifted, and we need to always be looking at how to differentiate our offerings to support, every learner. So, who else? Yes. And I'm going to do a time check too. Oh, we've got about 1 minute. I think, Otto, this will be our last question. Sorry, go ahead. And we hopefully some of us will be able to stay if you want. I'm not sure. I have to get my daughter. Okay, go ahead. Last question.
I just want to say, I applaud you for recognizing that a lot of these small Band-Aid changes over the years with boundary changes and everything are not the solution. I think part of how I feel, and I know I'm in good company, I would caution you to think that a broader perspective on how to change boundaries is the solution, and that, referring to a more creative way of perhaps looking, you say every time you make a change, there's people that are happy and people that are sad. Perhaps there is, per Peyton's vision, a way of keeping everything where it is now and focusing all of your energy and money instead on finding the creative solutions within those clusters. And I think that in the long run will make the majority of people happy. You change one thing now, and as you found, 5 to 10 years later, you've got to go and rechange them again. I would like to see a program that focuses on, all of us within the Lincoln cluster want to stay here, and we will bend over backwards to find a creative solution within that cluster. And I would like to see that focus of that PSU study perhaps more on that versus what is the best way to engage the community and how to change boundaries. Because I think I speak for a lot of people saying that that's not sustainable and that's not what the majority of people want.
So there are a couple things to that, and I appreciate what you're saying, that a broader perspective. Some people, and I just want to caution, some people would like things to stay where they are. Not everybody would like that to be the case. Some people feel that some people are getting more or less than others, and that's across the district. I appreciate the creative solution. If we come up with a creative solution, again, there are usually some people that like the creative solution and people who think it's wackadoodle.
Right.
And I say wackadoodle, but these are people's kids, and that's not funny to them.
Right.
So we might think, oh look, we put you on the 4th floor of the U.S. Bank building. Isn't that a creative solution? And people are furious because now all of a sudden they're away from the pier. And I just say that because, yes, we should look for creative solutions, and remember that we're dealing with people's most prized possessions or prized valuables, not the kids are possessions. The second piece is that, speaking of...
Sorry, I have to interrupt. There's state assets. That's the way you have to look
Yeah,
at it.
exactly.
And those are the terms that the legislature
Right.
needs to hear. These are our assets, and we have to protect and engender their welfare.
Great.
That's what we must
Fantastic.
do.
Thank you. What I wanted to say is that there is space currently right now in our high school buildings. So it's actually a pretty expensive way to build yourself out of a solution, to build you a new building just so you can fit more kids. For example, there's some room at Wilson. There's some room at Roosevelt. Now people begin to get really really nervous about those talks.
Well, there's room right now, but you fill that, and then there's going to be another issue 5 or 10 years down
So
the
there
road.
is. So most districts across the country do a regular boundary review so that they can manage their facility, so that they don't have to build a new facility every time a problem comes up. Because that's really an inefficient way, and it actually wastes money from most people's perspective to do it. So I know what you're saying, and to ignore the fact that we have capacity in our facilities right now to house the kids also pretends that there's, it doesn't acknowledge that there is a bigger perspective that could actually resolve it with much less money. And if we're talking about scrapping for money, then we have to take those really seriously. So I know what you're saying.
So the district-wide boundary review committee is actually immediately going to be looking at the Tier 1 and Tier 2 schools, and then we'll be taking about a year and a half before we'll be implementing any other kinds of changes. And I think clearly to the extent that, boundary changes have to happen, there'll be lots and lots of discussion along the way. I wanted to give you an opportunity to announce your meeting that's coming up next week.
Thank you.
Just so people are sure to.
If you would all like to come back on Monday at 7 o'clock downstairs in the cafeteria, the Long-Term Development Committee will be having, is Lindsay listening? A visioning session. However, this is very different this time, and it is important to carry that vision along. So for all the time that nothing was able to happen, we now have a very good chance at the 2016 bond. We can't, as Director Belial said, just focus on immediate needs. We have to continue to focus on the other things that can be done. So Monday the 24th at 7 o'clock, we will have speakers. Student speaker Lucas Schwab, Peyton Chapman will be speaking. Dr. Rensu from the Dean of Engineering at PSU will be there, as well as John Chapanya from Eco Northwest and Jennifer Williamson, our state representative for this district. So if you would like to come hear that talk, please join us and find out what we are working on. Thank you.
And I also wanted to let you know that the current bond includes about $1.5 million that's going to help us vision the next 3 high schools. So we actually have some money behind it. The idea,
Vision, master plan.
master plan even. So the hope is that by the time we go out for our next bond campaign in 2016, we'll actually be able to show the community what we're looking at. This is what Lincoln will look like, this is what Benson will look like, this is what Madison will look like. So it's a really exciting time for the Lincoln community, Benson and Madison, to be getting together and really doing that master planning and visioning. It's going to be a big deal to try to pass this next bond because we're adding to our current one. It's going to be a really big deal. The community's going to have to come together behind, but it also gives us an opportunity to build bigger and more modern buildings as we go. We know that our enrollment is going up by about 500 or 600 students a year, which is incredibly exciting. And so the quicker we can get these buildings up and running, the better. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for spending the evening with us. And we will have lots and lots of conversations over the next couple of weeks on the enrollment and transfer opportunities. And I hope you'll come and continue to talk with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.